Okay, we are now recording. I just want to say welcome everyone to another installment of the Alaska Wildlife Alliance's Wildlife Wednesday seminar. I'm having some technical difficulties trying to share my screen tonight, but I do want to go ahead and say I'm really excited for our presentation tonight. We have Marian Snively with us from ADF&G, and she's going to be talking about unraveling the mysteries of bats in Alaska. But before I jump in, I just want to go over a couple of virtual rules. Because we are using Zoom, we do want to avoid any Zoom bombing. So you may notice that when you joined, we asked that your video and audio be disabled. Not only does that help us keep this event as family friendly, but also it helps preserve bandwidth. So you can see images and videos a little bit clearer. We are also going to go ahead and let Marian give her presentation in full, and you can go ahead and ask questions at any time, but please ask them using the chat feature. And we will actually go through and address the questions at the end of her presentation, but you can go ahead and put them in there at any point in time. And so right now, Marian, if you want to go ahead and share your screen and get started, we're looking forward to learn about bats in Alaska.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. Hi, everybody. As Mandy said, I'm Marian Snively. I work for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And I started here about 18 years ago working for Lands and Refuges as a wildlife biologist. Then after that, I got a job with the non-game program, which through the years changed from that to the Wildlife Diversity Program, and then the Threatened, Endangered, and Diversity Program. So the name has changed through the years. I recently got a position as a wildlife education specialist. But during my time as a biologist, I studied bats for many years, Alaskan bats mostly. And so when Mandy came to me and asked me about this, I said I'd really be happy to give this presentation. So welcome, everybody. Okay, first of all, I'd like to talk about bat basics. I'm going to start out broad with bats worldwide, and then I'll focus on Alaska bats, and then I'll focus in on southeast bats. I'm sorry, south central bats. Okay, so I first like to dispel bat myths. There are a lot of them out there. A lot of people think bats are blind, but actually they can see quite well. They can see as well as we can. And they don't always have to use their echolocation at night. If they know a place well, you can actually turn that off and just fly by sight. Also, people think that bats suck blood. Well, there are 3 species of vampire bats that do eat blood, and that's all they can eat is blood. And so this is kind of hard to see. When I do live presentations, I actually pass these around, but this is a vampire bat skull, and you can see they have specialized teeth. They have 2 little fangs on the upper part of their jaw, and what they do is they just make little incisions in mostly domestic animals like goats or cows, and they have an anticoagulant in their saliva so that these animals will bleed a little bit more, but they don't suck the blood. They lap it up like maybe a dog or a cat would drink water. And they only drink about maybe 2 tablespoons of blood, and that fills them up. As you can see, I mean, they're very small little animals. And we don't have vampire bats in Alaska or in the United States or Canada. And when I was growing up in the upper Midwest, where there are a lot of bats, and I was always told to stay away from bats because they're attracted to your hair. They'll get caught in your hair, and you have to have all your hair cut off. Well, that's not true. A lot of times people think bats are rodents. They kind of look like little flying mice. They're not related to rodents at all. In fact, they're more closely related to primates or us than they are to rodents. People always would say, stay away from bats, they carry rabies, and it's true, they can, but not any more than other mammals. And in Alaska, there has been testing for rabies throughout the years. ADF&G has done some, and there's under 10 bats that were found with rabies, and all those bats were from southeast bats, not from south central. I say that with care though. We would like people to behave like all bats have rabies, not in a scare way, but you really don't know if they do or not necessarily. So treat them with respect, don't touch them, stay away from them. And you know, if they're acting kind of strange, call ADF&G and say, hey, I've got this really strange looking bat doing some weird things. So, okay, so those are just some of the bat myths. And I will like to talk about the bat, the Orderchiroptera. And there are two suborders. There's the Microchiroptera, or the little bats, and then there's Megachiroptera, or big bats. There's over 1,000 species of Microchiroptera and about 170 species of Megachiroptera. Now, let's put this in perspective. There are 1,240 bat species worldwide, and 43 of those species are in North America. So let's compare that to other mammals. So in the world, there are 55 deer species and 36 canidae or wolf dog type animals and 8 bear species. And so compare that to 1,240, and that's pretty amazing. Now we have 43 in North America. The order Chiroptera means hand wing. So they have the same bones in their wings as humans have in our hands. And so you can see from the picture on the left that, excuse me, that this is a human hand, a bat hand, but of course the fingers are proportionately much longer in a bat. That is, of course, for flight. A bat's flight pattern is very distinctive. They fly at slower speeds and they're a lot more maneuverable. And they need to do this because they do the echolocation and they're trying to find insects, flying insects in the nighttime. I don't know if anybody has children that are watching this. This slide was put for them. I would ask them, you know, put your hand on your hip and imagine your fingers longer than your legs. And if you look at this photo, their fingers, especially the one on its right hand, is much longer than their legs. Of course, again, that's for flight. I don't know how well you can see this. If this were live, again, I would be passing this around. Here's a bat skeleton. It's a little brown bat. See, they're pretty small. And actually, this is going to be really hard to show. That's a little brown bat skeleton. It's tiny. I showed you the vampire, not skeleton, the skull, and then compare it to the little brown bat. So they're small. They weigh about, the same as maybe 10 paper clips, so the little brown bats do, but we'll talk a little bit about that later. Their diet of all the different species of bats, 70% of bat species eat insects. Tropical bats eat fruit and they drink nectar, and then less than 1% are carnivorous bats that eat like frogs and rodents and other bats. And then, as I mentioned, there are 3 species of bats that feed on blood. Okay. So the feeding strategies are the insect-eating bats are called insectivorous. Bats, like I said, that eat frogs, mice, or other bats are carnivorous. Fish-eating bats are piscivorous. You can see a picture of that down below of a bat eating a fish that's looks much too big for him. The nectar-eating bats are called nectivorous bats. Fruit-eating, and there's a picture of one down in the corner. Frugivorous bats eating some fruit, and then blood-eating bats are sanguinivorous. They have a lot of unique adaptations, and one of them is echolocation, and they need this. They're nocturnal creatures, and they do that to avoid predators, and they have a lot of different predators. For instance, I inherited an owl pellet, and it's going to be kind of hard to see, but in this pellet are bat bones. You can see finger bones, you can see ribs, and part of a skull. And so, of course, owls are out at night too, so bats still have to be careful, and they like to go, if it's kind of lighter out, they'll go under trees and try to hide from nocturnal predators. And so bats find food by producing sound waves that come from their mouth or their nose, and the sound waves go out and high frequency. We can't even hear when they echolocate at all. We do have devices where you can put it up and it detects the call and it'll play it back for you, which is really cool to hear. But anyway, the sound waves bounce off the object and back to the bat's ears, and they can detect objects as small as human hair. They can also detect distance. It's pretty interesting. They're amazing animals. And so bats there are a lot of threats to bats. Some of it, wind turbines, that used to be it still is a huge, huge deal, but it used to be a bigger deal. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Pesticides are bad. So 70% of bat species eat insects, and insects are poison to protect plants and harvests or what have you, and bats will eat the insects, and that can bioaccumulate in their bodies and cause them to get sick and possibly die. Human disturbances really are a big threat to bats. If they're in, let's say, a maternity roost and you have mothers with the young and they're disturbed, that can cause the females to leave their young and the young can die. And habitat destruction is also a big deal because a lot of bats they'll roost in like old snags or trees, hollowed out trees, and even like live trees that might have some loose bark that can crawl underneath there if they need to. And so if you cut all these down, their habitat can be destroyed. And then so when I first took a bat workshop back in, I think it was 2009, maybe 2000, it was when white nose was really first becoming a thing. And if you don't know what white nose syndrome is, I'll talk about it a little bit more. When I first started doing bat presentations, nobody knew what white nose syndrome was. But when I took this workshop, they kept talking about wind turbines, wind turbines, wind turbines, and they'd say, but white nose syndrome is on the rise and is going to be a much more, a bigger problem than wind turbines, and that proved to be true. White nose syndrome has killed millions and millions of bats. Okay, this just shows the spread of white nose syndrome. Let's see if I can move this. This is in the way. So if you look at the cooler colors, starting out with this kind of purplish color in New York, that's where it was first located. It was in a cave in New York, and then the cooler colors kind of spread out through the years. So 2000, 2008 are the blue colors, 8 and 9 are the blue-green, and all the way to the red, that's the most recent infected state or area, county, I guess it is. 2018 and 2019 saw a spread. You can see some of these counties are spotted, and that means that the spores were detected, but it wasn't detected in bats yet. Okay. So this fungus is a cold-loving fungus, and it tends to live where bats like to hibernate. Bats need cool climates so that they can hibernate. If it's too warm, they can't go into hibernation, and then they'll use up all their energy stores and they won't survive the winter. They also need water because they do periodically wake up, and they need to drink water so that they can keep using their fat. You need to have water for fat to energize the fat, and so they'll lick like water on their fur when they wake up. But they do this just a few times throughout the winter. And this disease will spread from bat to bat. So another strategy that bats have for the winter when they hibernate is they'll group up in real tight clusters. And so that will spread the fungus from bat to bat. What happens then is that, so this fungus presents itself as a white powdery substance on its nose, hence the name white nose syndrome. It'll also go on the ears and the wings, and it will do damage to it. And thought that maybe that's why the bats are waking up, is from not being able to stay warm enough, or the damage being done causes them to wake up and use up their fat stores. And so once their fat stores are pretty much used up, they'll desperately leave the cave or the mine in late winter, early spring when no insects are around. That's why they're found outside of mines and caves fairly often. I think that's all I have to say about white nose syndrome. And why should we care about bats? There's actually been research done on the value of bats, and the research found that millions of dollars are saved in pest management from bats eating insects. Some bats will actually eat spiders too and other insects, and they do it all for free. They're also pollinators of flowers, and they're dispersers of seeds. And they are a huge part, as I mentioned, of the biodiversity of the world. And one insectivorous bat can eat thousands of bugs in a single night. So think about that. You know, you have maybe a bat box, a bat house in your backyard, and you used to have a lot of mosquitoes, and you don't even want to go out and sit out and enjoy the summer evenings. But if you have a bunch of bats, so they're going to go out and they're going to eat thousands of mosquitoes in the night. So they're very important. I'd like to talk a little bit about Alaskan bats. So we have 6 species of bats. We have the California bat, long-legged bat. We have silver-haired bat. That's what this picture is of a beautiful silver. They're gorgeous bats. We have a Yuma bats. And then just recently, researchers Karen Blavis and Tori Rhodes in Southeast Alaska had bat detectors out, and they detected the signature call of a hoary bat. It's a very distinctive call, very low frequency, and they've found it many times on the landscape. They haven't caught one yet, and so that's really cool, and that's a carnivorous bat. And so little brown bat, I like to call that our bat. It's the only bat that's known to breed in south central interior in western Alaska. I had bat recorders out last summer, and I went through the data, and I found a really low frequency call that I sent out to other researchers, and I think it's a California bat, which would be very cool to find that here. The person who took over the bat detector or bat recorder project ran them this summer, and she hasn't looked at the data yet, but she's going to keep her eye open for any different calls. Okay, little brown bats, like I said, they're very small. They have 1 young per year. They can live to be about 30 plus years. They're very long lived for a small mammal. Think of like a small rodent that, if it's lucky, it'll live through 1 year. And these animals can live a very long time. We know that because when we capture bats, we put a little metal tag on their forearm, and we put it not too tight, but these can stay on for years. And so I think Wisconsin researchers have fairly recently recovered a bat that was caught 30 years previously, and same in Russia, they found a bat that was 30 plus years. And if that bat wasn't caught as a pup, you can pretty much only discern pups from adults. So pup is a baby bat, of course. And so if these researchers caught these bats as adults, they didn't know what age they were when they were first caught. Okay, we don't know much about south central, western, and interior bats. We're learning more, a lot more. We have a lot more researchers doing work on bats than we did in the past. A lot of this driven by white nose syndrome, of course. There's a lot of research, students doing research on bats at the university. At UAA, I know of for sure at least 3 of them, maybe 4. So basic questions we don't know about them here. Where are they found? How many bats do we have? That's a very difficult question to answer, but with these bat recorders, it's kind of opening up kind of an index of how many bats are on the landscape. We don't know where they overwinter. So again, the bat researchers in Southeast Alaska, Tori Rhodes and Karen Blavis, are trying to figure that out. And so they do what's called driving transects. So they have a bat recorder on the outside of their vehicle, and they drive certain areas. And what they found in the fall, that there are like clusters of bat calls in certain areas. And what bats do is they swarm before they go into hibernation. And the swarming is for breeding. They breed right before they go into hibernation. And so they detected these certain areas, and they're going into these areas. They're teaching a dog to sniff out bat guano. So they're going into the areas, and they actually have found some areas where bats are hibernating. They put some cameras out, and they have footage of bats going in and out of scree fields and root wads. And so that's super exciting. And what are we doing for our bats here? And so ADF&G has done, and we're continuing to do some projects and research projects to figure out a little more about our bats. This is essentially me taking a bat out of a mist net. You can hear it's vocalizing, which is different from echolocating. They get very tangled up in these mist nets at time, but they're actually pretty easy to get out once you get the hang of it. And I have rabies shots, but I still protect my hands with gloves. And we take measurements after we capture them. If there's any parasites, we collect them. We didn't put any radio tracking equipment on them for this research project. It was just catching them, seeing if it's a boy or a girl. Sometimes if you let them bite your glove, they kind of calm down a little bit. And then after we get them out of the net, there were new people here, so I was kind of showing them a little bit about the bats. I'm looking for scars. White nose syndrome will give them a lot of scars in their wings. But we'll put them in a bat bag, and then we process them at the table, and then we release them. You can see there's a lot of mosquitoes around there. Okay, that's enough, that's good. And so we did a citizen science project, and we tied it up with the bat captures so that citizen scientists would tell us where bats are, and then we would ask them if we could go and do bat captures at the area. And we took little biopsy samples, and those are housed at the UAF Museum of the North. Okay, so we had 10 years of citizen science data, and we actually had a paper published. It was Tesler et al., and it was called New Insights on the Distribution, Ecology, and Overwintering Behavior of the Little Brown Myotis in Alaska. It was published in Northwestern Naturalist in 2015. Some of the results I have here. So if you look on the left-hand image, you can see this shaded out area. That's where bats were known or thought to be previous to this study, to the citizen science study. And so you can see we have bats as far north as Kotzebue, White Mountain, and Samiti Islands of all places. And so that's pretty cool. And then this on the right, it shows maternity roosts around the site. So the solid stars are maternity roosts that we defined as 12 or more bats because non-reproductive females and males will usually roost alone or maybe with one or two others. And the hollow stars, those are where pups were verified. So if there's a pup, it's a maternity roost. Okay. And then I wanted to just show this because at the time of this study, there were only 3 natural substrates that citizen scientists found bats in. And so that makes sense really, because if there's no people there, there's nobody to call us and let us know or send pictures of bats in an area. So mostly they're in houses or buildings, cabins, some in bat houses. That's kind of new. When I first started, people never had bats in bat houses, and they would put them up and bats wouldn't go there. So I'm not really sure if there's really an increase or not. Barns, actually bats are found quite a bit in umbrellas, in like table umbrellas. And my mother used to tell me in Michigan, she would find bats in her umbrella quite often. So you can see mostly unnatural substrates. Human structures. We'll talk a little bit about the bat recorder data. So this is another research project, and we're writing the manuscript right now. It should be in press very soon. And so this bat recorder data is from 2015, 2017. I'm sorry, 2015 through 2017. In 2018, we were starting up a different project. It was called a PICA project. And I was in the field a lot, and I couldn't get to the bat detectors as much as I wanted to. But in 2019, I was able to collect data that year too. So that's all included. It's an image of the recording sites, and that goes along with the land cover, the association habitat. And the red is actually developed sites, and then there's non-developed sites, basically. And also, we added to this some recording data that I had from early on, like 2015, around this area. We just added that to the manuscript fairly recently. Okay, I'm going to look at the time real quick to see how much time I have. I'm good. So this is a really busy graph. So let's kind of hide part of it. Okay, so the x-axis on the bottom is the date, starting from early spring, going through into the fall. Okay, the y on the left side, that's the time of night. So just remember, 24 means midnight. So that's the middle of the night. And then temperature, don't have to worry about that right now. That'll come a little later. The darker, the little square, so the squares represent calls per hour. And so the darker the square, the more bats are out on the landscape. So the darkest ones are greater than 25 calls per hours. And the empty ones, the empty squares, that's less than 5 calls per hour. I'm sorry, less than 1/2 of a call per hour. And as it gets darker, it gets more intense. What's interesting here, okay, let me break this down more. So the dark dashed line on the bottom of the curve, that represents sunset. And the lighter dashed on the top of that curve, that represents sunrise. Everything in between those two lines, that's night. Okay, so you can see in this graph, there are some bats that are flying after sunrise. That's pretty interesting. And then also you can see that they're flying out feeding before sunset a little bit. You can see too from this that the bats are coming in pretty early. They're starting in mid to late March and coming in pretty full force, I would say, in May. And then they're tapering off. I can't see the below, just a second. Late September and October. So they're here for a long time. And what's that telling me? It's telling me that they might be hibernating nearby. And that's beginning to be what I think. When I first started working with bats here, I didn't believe they could manage to hibernate here, but I'm kind of changing my mind. Another thing to take away, yeah, bats are feeding before dark and after dark. And so it seems like maybe more so later, but there are more bats because the pups have become volant or are able to fly now. And they don't really know how to be a bat yet, so they're kind of learning to be a bat. I get a lot of calls about young bats being found, and that's usually what they are, the ones that are outside, you know, during when it's not dark. Also take away, yeah, it's you can see bats all the way into late October, and even I remember having a bat in November, a bat call in November, and also in March. So yeah, they're probably hibernating here. So let's get the second half of this. Okay, don't be scared of that. That's just temperature. It's the minimum temperature throughout the season, and so it's in centigrade. This dotted the dotted line that you see, that's freezing, and I want you to pay attention to that -5 when I bring back the above graph. So if you look at that -5, it's the minimum temperature. When it drops, when it stops dropping below -5, that's when you get more bats. And also when they start leaving, it's pretty much when they start dropping below -5 or real close to it. Okay. And so many questions, like I said, where do our bats overwinter? I'm starting to wonder if there may be Portage Valley, in the mountains and talus slopes. In Norway, they have found bats to overwinter in scree fields. So these are high latitude areas. Colorado, up in the Alpine, they'll overwinter in boulder fields. In Southeast Alaska, as I mentioned, they'll hibernate in root wads as scree fields. South Central Alaska, like I mentioned, bats fly early and leave late in the season. And if you look at this picture, this is a bat found in Petersville. It was found in October, the 21st of October, so late. It was below freezing. There was snow on the ground. The way this bat was found was there were a couple of geologists going out, and they found this rock outcropping, and they wanted to get a sample of the rock. And so, you know, they hit the rock with their pick and grabbed the sample, and they found this little bat hunkered down in this crack. And so it's possible and likely that this bat is intending to overwinter here. So that was a really cool find. Let's talk a little bit about implications of white nose syndrome. So bats in the lower 48, they will hibernate in very large groups, as I mentioned, so they have that bat-to-bat contact and the spread of the virus. We don't know if they do that here. If they're going into scree fields, root wads, there's not a lot of space, so they may not be really in contact. So maybe it's not as big of a problem here when if white nose syndrome comes here. And because we don't know what our bats do in the winter, it's really, really hard to figure this out. Okay, you might wonder what you can do for our bats. Oh, you can build a bat house. You can just talk to people about bats. If you hear somebody's freaked out, hate bats, maybe you could kind of sway them that bats are good. They're the good guys. If there's any citizen science projects out there, you may want to participate in them. Tell us if you find a maternity roost, and possibly, I'm not sure what they're doing for bats this next summer, but if they come up with more bat recorders, maybe you could volunteer to put a bat recorder out and maintain it by changing out SD cards and batteries. Okay, I think this is the last slide. At this point, Mandy, I don't know if you got your PowerPoint up. There you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Marian. Yeah, so I don't see any questions yet in the chat. So while folks are taking a few minutes to try to put the questions in the chat, we will see if I can just show my screen, if I figured out the technical glitches, and I will just run through very briefly just a couple of slides about Alaska Wildlife Alliance. So just for everybody else, remember, go to the chat and put your questions in for Marian there.
Oh, good.
And, okay. Marian, can you see, is it displaying?
Yes, it is.
My screen? Okay, it doesn't look like it's going to go into presentation mode for me. Well, okay, so I'm running a little blind here, so hopefully I'll just kind of go through and see what I can get here. Are you seeing the virtual engagement guidelines slide?
Yeah, I am, but I'm not seeing it in slideshow mode.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about it in this mode since it is not cooperating with me. Just real quick, there was a few things I just wanted to talk about. You know, I'm with Alaska Wildlife Alliance. I'm Mandy, I'm the Deputy Director. I'm having some serious technical issues with Zoom today, so thanks so much for bearing with me. Real briefly, Alaska Wildlife Alliance is an Alaska-based nonprofit protecting Alaska's wildlife through citizen mobilization, advocacy, and education. And we've been around since 1978. Being a nonprofit, we do work off donations and grants, and we do have some other ways if you'd like to support us. Amazon Smile, for instance, if you do any Amazon shopping, we're a charity through smile.amazon.com. For the PFD, we're a charity for Pick, Click, Give. And then right now, if you're a federal employee or a military member, you're very aware with the combined federal campaign. So that has just started, and we're a new charity with the CFC. We would appreciate anything if you want to help support us. We do use social media a lot to keep folks updated. We do post about wildlife advocacy opportunities, educational opportunities and events, and some wildlife fun through Trivia Tuesdays and things like that. If you don't use social media, you can go ahead and sign up through our website, which is akwildlife.org. And you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, and we can email that to you, and that will help you stay on top of things going on regarding Alaska's wildlife. Real quick, I want to highlight just a couple of advocacy things. Those of you who have been watching our Wildlife Wednesdays, we've talked about the Kenai rule, and it was a public comment period. Fish and Wildlife Service proposed changes to the way wildlife are managed on the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge. There was a public comment period that ended in August, but they have just announced that they're going to be reopening the public comment period soon. And this time they're actually going to have a hearing virtually for public testimony. So if you want us to send you a text alert when there's more information about this process, you can text the word refuge to the phone number on the screen, and I will actually put it in the text, the chat feature, so I can keep us moving along. But we're really excited that there's going to be another chance for the public to comment, and we encourage you to let your voice be heard. A couple of other advocacy opportunities right now involve trapping of wolves on Prince of Wales Island and lynx in Chugach State Park. Our organization has filed a petition for both of these, and we would encourage you to look at these either on our social media page or our website to learn more about these. And again, it's another opportunity to get your voice heard. Switching to some fun things. In case you haven't heard, beluga whales are back in the Kenai River. They're being seen. If you would like to receive an alert via text message about when belugas are in the river, so you can maybe go beluga watch, you can text the word beluga to 833-541-0408. I will put that in the chat as well. And then you can also go to our website and learn more about how to become a beluga citizen scientist through our partnership with the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Partnership. Right now too, another fun thing that we have going on is we're in the middle of our wildlife photo calendar contest. So each year we ask folks to submit a photo of Alaska wildlife animal or scene. Those are due to me, so Mandy at akwildlife.org, by October 15th. So we just got about another week on those. So these are some of the images from last year's calendar that are just some amazing photographers out here. You may notice the image in the bottom right is not a real live wildlife, but every October we do have a Alaska Wildlife pumpkin carving contest. So this was the pumpkin design that won last year. So if you want to have something, a family-friendly fun event with your kids, or you can be creative and carve a wildlife-themed pumpkin and submit the pictures also to me. Those are due October 28th at Mandy at akwildlife.org. And then the last thing really quick is we have been recording our Wildlife Wednesdays now that we've gone virtual. We post them on our website and the Alaska Wildlife Alliance YouTube channel. So if you've missed one, you can go back and check it out. And then just wanted a plug, we have some upcoming ones scheduled. One on the 21st of this month. It's kind of targeting folks in the Kenai Peninsula region, but it's what you need to know about the upcoming trapping season. And then in early November, our speaker will be talking about hormones in whales, and then what the tiny molecules can tell us about these giants of the sea. So with that, I just want to go ahead and bring it back to Marian tonight. I want to thank you so much for volunteering your time to present to us and teach us about bats. I want to thank all of AWA's members and supporters that donate to our program and allow us to host these types of events. And then to everyone who participated in tonight, because clearly you care about Alaska's wildlife and you want to learn more. And so Marian, we do have some questions that have come in. So we're going to transition back to you real quick, and thank you for bearing with me on that. Okay. Great question here. How can we learn more about how to make a bat house?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And so there is a site called Bat Conservation International. It's a website. It's a wonderful bat, all about bats. And it's Bat Conservation International. I can help walk you through it. My email is my name, marian.snively, SNIVELY, @alaska.gov. I can write that in the chat. You can call me. This Bat Conservation International, it shows you what type of bat houses will work where in the lower 48. but it doesn't really touch on Alaska. And so we kind of have different things, like you want to paint the bat houses a darker color because it's a little colder. Well, not last summer, but usually a lot colder. You might want to put a couple bat houses out on different sides of the house. And other things, single chambered bat houses is what we recommend to people. So if you want to look up Bat Conservation International and the bat houses, also check out a lot of their links if you're a bat lover. It's amazing. And also follow up with an email to me, and we can chat about it. I can give you my phone number and we can talk about it.
That sounds great. And I have completely lost my Zoom feed here. Okay, there we go. I've got you back.
Yeah,
now.
I lost mine too. That was weird.
Okay, I can see you again. Let me get back. I lost the chat. There we go. Okay. Sorry, lots of issues tonight, folks. So here's another question. Are bats mammals? And if so, are they the only flying mammals apart from flying squirrels?
I can't see the chats. I'm really glad that whoever brought that up because I usually mention that. So they're the only mammal that can actually have true flight. So yes, they are a mammal. And so, like, of course, birds, they have bills and they don't have teeth. And so that makes them different than mammals, if that's what you were thinking. But flying squirrels actually don't have true flight. They're more, should be called gliding squirrels, I think. So thanks for bringing that up. I forgot to mention that.
As well, we've got great members. They ask great questions. We're so excited. I think the Q&A is my favorite part of these events. So another question is, what's the furthest north in Alaska that a bat has ever been spotted?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. I was going to bring this up, but it wasn't really part of my study. Rachel Snively, a bat researcher that was out of Fairbanks, she was doing her own citizen science work too to augment her master's thesis. And there are bats in way up above the North Slope in I've never said this name out loud, Utqiagvik, which used to be Barrow. Apparently in a school way up north, they had some bats.
Oh, that's great. Wow, I would not have thought they would have been that far north. That's exciting.
Mandy, I have one here that's a private message. And talking about, they put up a couple of bat houses, and they had bats, but none this year in the bat houses. Is there a bat attractant that we should use? And so I've never heard of a bat attractant whatsoever. Basically, it's all about location. Last summer it was really hot. Maybe that's why. Are your bat houses black? Are they warm enough in the summer? Are they facing south sides? And it could be that it's just not warm enough there this summer, whereas last summer being so hot as it was. The other thing that could have happened, I don't know where you live, but there were a lot of fires. The bats could have been roosting in trees or what have you. And I don't know if you live near a fire from last year, but they were pretty much all over. So it could be that they had to go and find a new place to avoid the fires and the smoke. Thank you for that.
That's a good point. I have a question for you, Marian. You mentioned citizen science program and being a bat reporter. And I don't know if that program is still going on, but citizen science is something that we at Alaska Wildlife Alliance really like to encourage. Is there opportunity for folks to become citizen scientists for bats? And if so, how would they do that?
And so, like I mentioned, my old position is when I did a lot of this work, and citizen science was about 60% of my job. Fish and Game just posted my old job for interviews, and so it will be up to the supervisor, the new me. And so I really, because of the pandemic, I don't really see my old supervisor or my late supervisor, and so not late. And so, yeah, I would have to ask her, Mandy, and we can talk about it.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, and if there is information, we can go ahead and post that on the Alaska Wildlife Alliance webpage so folks can find that pretty easily.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is there something in the meantime, if folks do have a bat sighting, is there a place that they can just go and report that? Is like an online portal or anything?
There is an online portal for wildlife, and I don't have that handy. It's mostly for moose and bears, but people sometimes will send bat questions or bat sightings there. I'm sorry, I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but Mandy, I can get that to you. It's a website where you can report online bat sightings.
And if it's the one that I'm thinking about, we actually have on our webpage at the top a place to report injured wildlife. And so we do have a link for like injured moose and things like that. And it is an online kind of form that you fill out. So it might be that same form that is already available on our website. So we can double check that too.
There should be one that's less specific, that's just report wildlife, but I can't remember if it's just injured wildlife, but they can report it there. I've gotten bat reports from that site.
Okay, great.
Sure that one or the other one.
Good to know that the information is, yeah, it's good to know the information is getting forwarded on then. So another question, do you know what the smallest species of bat and the largest species are?
Yeah, so, well, I don't know if I know the largest species, but the smallest it's called a bumblebee bat, of all things. It's so cute. It's about the size of the tip of your thumb, might just sit right there. And so the largest bat, I don't know it to species, but it would be like your flying fox type species. And their wingspan can be as long as 6 feet, so bigger than my arm span.
Wow, that's quite a range there.
Yes.
Okay, I see one more question. Those of us in Anchorage, what can we do to foster healthy bat communities?
Okay, specifically in Anchorage, I would say putting up bat houses would be one way to do it. And then if they do more citizen science for the TED program, they can use volunteers. They would really like that's a good experience for people, especially if you're interested in biology or what have you.
Sounds like that might be a good family project or
yes.
a at-home classroom project.
Well, and I don't know, like I said, I don't know how they're going to expand it, but if people put up bat houses, maybe you can do counts. If you get bats near bat houses, you can stay up until an hour before sunset and do a count for, I think it's an hour. There's a protocol where you can do it, but I'm not sure they're going to continue that yet or not.
Okay, that sounds good.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions coming in the chat, and I don't know if you've got any more sent to you.
Yeah, let me look.
Yeah.
No, I don't see any more.
Okay. Well, with that, I want to say thank you again to Marian for taking her time. And we got a chat coming in from Ricky saying, thank you from me and my 9-year-old, exclamation mark.
Nice.
And so before folks sign off, we would love to just hear, you know, where you've joined us from. If you're in Anchorage or where around the state of Alaska, or if you're out of state, you know, we'd love to hear where folks are joining us from. And so with that, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.